Hey, if you just joined us, maybe this is your first Sunday being here or the first Sunday in a long time. We started a series. This is part 3 in a series as we talk about game plan. I try to put together some sort of a sports theme to this whole thing about finding the will of God. I think that's a prayer all of us have prayed. We want to know the will of God. I don't make too many sports references because if I do, you're just going to know how sports ignorant I really am. So anyway, the best I can do is put a picture of a football before you and call it game plan. So that's about as sporty as I get. Anyway, but we're trying to answer this question, this prayer that all of us pray from time to time. God, what is your will for my life? Like, I want to know. And it's more than should I buy the red one or the green one. It's more like, Lord, what direction am I supposed to go in life? Who am I supposed to marry? What career should I follow? Where am I supposed to live? What am I supposed to do? And all of us have asked that question. We've prayed that prayer. God, what am I supposed to do? All of us, I think, from the moment we're born, we have this sense inside of us that there is something bigger, there's something greater than ourselves, that we are a part of a bigger movement. We just don't know where to get on and what it's supposed to be. It's got to be something more than just being born and grown up through the adolescent years and getting pimples and trying to find a date, and then you find a mate, and then you have kids, and then you kind of get older and you get cellulite. Maybe you're on a second marriage, and then you start wearing clothes that don't match and black socks with your sandals, and then you retire and play golf. I mean, there's got to be more to all of that, right? I don't think, and the incredible thing, we think about this stuff. I don't think our pets do. I don't think your dog lays around the house thinking about what God's plan is for your dog's future. I just don't think that's there in that whole thing. But we think about that because in all of us, there's a sense that there's a bigger reason for us to be here. So we're going to try to answer that question some more this morning. Here's what we're going to do today. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk for a little while. I'm going to talk about life, talk about my life, and then we're going to look at some scriptures that really apply to the subject that we're on. And then we're going to take some time at the end to pray. And so if you're here today, just be prepared. That's kind of what's going to happen today. So we want to answer the question because we want to know the will of God. We started talking about the moral will of God, the providential will of God, and then God's personal will for our lives. Remember, the providential will of God is like, this is just God. He's large and in charge. God's going to do what God does because He's God. He's got the remote control. God can do it. God's going to do it. And then there's the moral will of God, like paying your taxes and not cheating or lying or stealing, that kind of thing. We don't pray too much about that. We pray a lot about God's personal will for our lives because that's just really what we care about. God, what do you want me to do? And then last week we visited a little bit about we would love to move ahead with God, but sometimes we're afraid to move ahead with God because we're afraid of something called risk. If it wasn't risky, it wouldn't be called risk, I guess. I don't know, but we're just afraid to move ahead, and we're afraid to try things. We looked at this incredible story that Jesus told that really said that the guy who lost everything was the guy who risked nothing. And all of us have this specific God-given gift that is given to us. God has given it to us. You are distinctly good at something that nobody else is. You can balance books. You're great with finances. You can draw pictures. You can write stories. You can tell stories. You can take an engine apart and put it back together again. There's just something about you that is uniquely you. And you know it's a God-given gift. And you'd like to use it maybe to honor God, maybe as a vocation in life. But you're just waiting for the opportunity to come. You're just waiting for the opportunity to come. And so you're holding back because of fear, and you're unwilling to take that risk because you just don't know what's going to happen. Some of you say, well, I'd be willing to take a risk if the opportunity would ever make itself available, but I don't see any opportunities in my life, so this is my station in life. My station in life is just like, this is a death sentence. This is my job. This is who I am. I'm never going to get anywhere. I'm just stuck here, and I can never move on, and we're going to talk about that today. And part of the reason that we have problems, we get stuck in those places, is simply because of our attitude. Let's just be honest, because some of you have had some opportunities availed to you. When you looked at the opportunity, you looked at the opportunity, it was maybe a job thing. We're going to talk about jobs mostly today because most people, when they want to know the will of God, about 80% when they say, I want to know the will of God, it refers to their job. It's not necessarily about who to marry or what college to go to, but a lot of people just want to know, what am I supposed to do with my life? And we're thinking about career and vocation. And some opportunities have opened to you, but you said, you know what, that when I start looking at what the pay is for that job, I start looking at the duties of that job, I start maybe looking at who I'm going to work for or work with, what it pays, it's beneath me. I'm not going to do that. And we maybe have missed an opportunity that God has put before us. We want to know the will of God. And I think finding the will of God is not nearly as difficult as we make it to be sometimes. Because for all of us, all the time, there are all these golden opportunities that lay before us. We knock on doors, we're making phone calls, and there's all of these opportunities. And it's for us to know which opportunities we're supposed to step through and the times to wait. And sometimes we miss opportunities. We miss opportunities because we're so focused on where we are in the moment. In fact, the job that you have right now, you're a roustabout, you're a floor hand, you're a truck driver, you're a sales clerk, you're a mom, you're retired, you're a student. You know what? We miss a lot of opportunities because where we are in life right now, we don't see it as an opportunity. We see it as a sentence. Like if you had my job, Pastor, you think the same thing. It's a sentence. We don't get to come to work like you do, Pastor, and have Nerf gun wars. We don't actually do that, just saying. Like there's no fun in my job. It's a sentence. And I'm telling you, church, that every opportunity that you're in right now is just that. It can be an opportunity, or it can be a sentence. It can be a place where you're just waiting for something better, or it can be an opportunity for God to do something in you. Let me explain what I mean, because see, we can miss God's opportunities if we have the wrong perspective on things. All of the opportunities where you are in life right now might be a place where God is preparing you for another opportunity. Not necessarily a better opportunity, but another opportunity. There's a guy we read about in the Old Testament. His name is Moses. We know Moses probably best of all is leading the whole nation of Israel out of the most powerful country at the time, Egypt. And we see him leading millions of people out. As you read this Old Testament narrative, Moses becomes this phenomenal leader. He's the greatest leader, I think, of the Old Testament era. He's just incredible, but we won't focus too much about Moses before that event when he walked up to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." Before he was herding people, he was herding sheep. For 40 years in the wilderness, Moses is herding sheep. Now, I don't know a lot about sheep. One thing I know two things. They're dumb and they stink. That's what I know about sheep. And for 40 years, this is what Moses does. But what Moses didn't realize, and what we don't realize in those times when things aren't so grand and great in our life, is that can be a time of preparation for something greater to come in our life. So it was for Moses. David, this guy, King David. David is sent by his dad to go see how his brothers are doing on the battle lines. It's a very famous story in the Old Testament. So David goes out to the battle lines, and Israel is going to fight this other army, the Philistines. And the battle lines are drawn. There's a valley, and on one side of the valley are the Philistines, and on the other side are the Israelites. And for 40 days, they're just kind of going out there flexing their muscle, but nobody's willing to take the battle because of one guy in the Philistine army. He's Goliath. He's just this giant, this huge guy, and nobody's willing to engage in the battle. Well, David goes out there and goes, "Well, why isn't anybody doing anything about this guy? I'll go out there and fight him." To which Saul and David's brother said, "Look at you, David. You're just like maybe a teenager, pipsqueak," and David had been herding sheep as well. "What do you know about taking on this giant?" Well, let me just tell you. Maybe I was out herding sheep, but while I was herding sheep, guess what? One day a lion came to attack the flock. And you know what I did? I killed it. Another day, a bear came to attack the flock. You know what I did? I killed it with my bare hands. And if I can kill a lion and I can kill a bear, what's this uncircumcised Philistine? Let's go do this. And he saw his time out there herding sheep as an opportunity, as preparation for something else to come. And God makes David to be this incredible king. And then there's another Old Testament figure. His name is Joseph. Joseph had 11 brothers, and they all hated him. I don't know what your family was like, but they plotted to kill him. They didn't kill him, though. They sold him into slavery. And while he's in slavery, the first place he's enslaved is a guy named Potiphar. He's in Potiphar's house. While he's there, Potiphar recognizes the giftings of Joseph. Now, Joseph didn't sign up. He didn't volunteer to go be a slave in Potiphar's house. Maybe you say, "I didn't volunteer to come to Williston. I had to come to Williston." I mean, I'm just telling you, if you prayed about coming to Williston, that's an answered prayer. Thank you for coming to Williston. But he's in Potiphar's house, and there's something organizational and giftings that he's got. And so Potiphar puts him in charge of all the other household servants. Well, unjustly, and you can read the story, then Joseph is sent to prison. Well, Joseph didn't sign up to go to prison. I mean, it's just he's there. But while he's there, the prison warden recognizes how gifted this guy is. And he makes the best of his present situation, and he starts organizing things in the prison. And the warden sees this and says, "You know what? You're so good at this. Let me put you in charge. of all the prisoners. This is great. So you got guys like David and Joseph and Moses who were in a situation where they could have looked at their circumstances and said, this is a sentence. This is not where I want to be. I'm miserable. I want out. But it was a time that God was preparing them for another opportunity. Maybe like you, when you're in your 20s, you really don't know where you're going in your early 20s. You haven't got it quite figured out. Some people do, and I admire those people that do, but some people don't. I didn't. In high school, I took up this hobby. I love taking pictures. I bought a camera. I started taking pictures for the yearbook and the annual and all that kind of thing, and I had a great time, which was kind of a conundrum. Maybe I was trying to prove myself, because if you don't know this about me, you're going to know it now. I'm visually impaired. So here comes this visually impaired or legally blind guy in high school who's a photographer. And I didn't do a bad job either. It's just kind of fun. Coincidentally, this last week, Pastor Dan and I did chapel services down at Trinity Christian School, and we like to do once in a while a Q&A time with him, question and answer. And we've done that here in church on Sunday nights. And so the staff had all the students bring their phones to chapel that day so that they could text their questions anonymously to my phone. They're not in my contact list. I don't know who they are. And one of the first questions that came up, are you the legally blind pastor? Don't you love it? Isn't that great? This is great, as opposed to being illegally blind. That's right. So anyway, I didn't know where I'm going in high school, but photography is all I knew. So what do? I'm going to go to school for photography. So I go to 2 years of college, commercial photography, come out with a degree in commercial photography. Where does a blind photographer get a job? I'll tell you, Williston, North Dakota. I started working for the Williston Herald, you know. This is God's promised land, isn't it? Huh? That was pretty weak. I heard a couple of amens. It's all good. And still had no direction, but it's interesting when you look back in life. When you look back in life, you can see in retrospect, you can see how God was orchestrating things. Unfortunately, in the moment, we don't always see how God is putting our lives together. And I think sometimes, church, we miss the hand of God and the move of God because we're a step ahead of Him. We want to know what God wants for our future now, instead of saying where God has me now might be preparation for where He's taking me, regardless of where you are in life. If you're a student in school, if you're retired, if you're a single parent, if you're standing behind the desk as a clerk, if you're out there on a rig, wherever it might be. Because see, we tend to think in our prayer time and in our thinking, we're thinking, you know what God is most concerned about in my life? My comfort and well-being. And I think God's a little more concerned about our character than He is our comfort and our well-being. And so here I am, graduated, I come back here to Williston, started working. I still had no direction in life. I came to faith in this church, though, while I was working at the Williston Herald. In fact, somebody that I worked with that's here in the service this morning brought me to this church. I said yes to Jesus. All of a sudden, things look so different in my life. The perspective is all different. I still didn't know where I was going, but I knew God at that point in time. Well, in the course of a few months after this whole thing, I could take you right to the place I was standing out here in the lobby of this church. And this guy that was a part of this church, his name was Lynn Kennedy. Lynn Kennedy was a big man. Lynn comes and wraps his arm around me about the size of a bear hug. I mean, it's just huge. He puts his arm around me, and he looks down at me, and I'm looking up at Lynn, and he says, Chris, have you ever thought about team teaching Sunday school? No, but I'm having a feeling that that's what you want me to think about right now, you know. And he says, why don't you help me out? I teach the 5th grade boys, like the worst Sunday school class in the building, right? So he says, here's the book. You read up on it. You join me next Sunday. And so I get up there, and I'm reading through the book, and I join Lynn Kennedy. I could take you to the classroom. It's where our little kids are this morning, and I'm up there with 20-some 5th grade boys, and I'm watching Lynn teach. He's phenomenal the way he connected. And we team taught together one, maybe 2 Sundays, I think, as I remember this, before he said, I can't be there. You're on your own. Okay, you know, and looking back, I feel so bad for those 5th grade boys. I don't know if any of them are serving Jesus today. But anyway, as time went on, I started to develop a burden for the students of our church, our youth. And I don't even remember how the whole thing happened, but pastor called together a bunch of people that were interested in working with the youth, and we all met in the first office up the stairs. It's now our photocopy room. It's the work room. And that was the pastor's office. We're sitting in this big circle, and he says, we need somebody to lead our youth. Let's take a vote. He's doing the pieces of paper. Write your name on there. Well, we came back. Every name was me except for one, and that was because I didn't vote for myself because I thought it was wrong, you know? So now I'm working with the youth, and I'm thinking, I like this. This is kind of fun. It's a little scary. I might be blind and not be able to take pictures, but I can talk, right? Okay. So we started working with it, and then we went to Bible college. We come back here, and understand this was a nest to Robin and me. This became our nest because we came to faith in this church. We love the people of this church. In the summers while I was at college, we came back and worked in this church. We worked with one of the group homes here in Williston for 2 of the summers. This became our nest. We got hired back as the first full-time youth pastor this church had ever hired. This was the nest. Well, the pastor that hired me, he in the course of a few months left, and here I am in this church. And then the new pastor that came, we started working together, and I'm being a youth pastor, working with this brand new pastor, and the new pastor that came, and me, and I left, went to another church. It just wasn't gelling really well. And so that was a hard day because we had to say goodbye to this church that we loved. And I'm not very happy about leaving this church or this community that I loved. Coincidentally, the man that stood behind the microphone right over here today, I remember him. His name is Ron, shaking our hands on our farewell thing. Well, maybe the Lord will bring you back here someday. And in my mind, I'm thinking, fat chance, that ain't never going to happen. We'll never be back in Williston again. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? So we're off in this little bitty town of 900 plus people, pastoring this German church. And all the people of the community, they talk a little different than we do, hey. They eat strudel and Nefla and that kind of stuff in this German town. And it wasn't always easy in this little church. And the first year, especially that Robin and I are there in this community, we cried tears. Because this is not where we wanted to be. I don't want to do ministry here. But we were there for 14 years, and in those 14 years, we knocked on doors because we wanted out. I remember in some of the low points of ministry in that job, Pastor Andrew, I got the Bismarck Tribune newspaper and looked through the help wanted ads. I wonder if they need somebody at Walmart to put stickers on people and give them a cart, because that's got to be a lot easier than where I am right now. Oh, God, please let me out of Glen Ullin. We want out. And maybe the job, maybe the station, the vocation, the place where you are in life right now, that's exactly where you are. I came to Williston, North Dakota, not because I wanted to. I didn't wake up, crawl out of bed, get out the map and say, baby, we're going to Williston. This is God's spot. This is where he's got us. Oh, I just feel like this is where we want to be. And you know what? I'm going to leave my 6-figure job and I'm going to go drive truck. I'm going to live in a man camp. I don't think anybody got out with that kind of an ambition. So you came to Williston and here you are. And I hear a number of people saying, well, I'm doing this now, but I'm going to do this later. I'm waiting for something better to come. And I think we miss God's time of preparation in our life because we don't see where we are right now as an opportunity of growth. We see it as a time of waiting until something else or something better comes along. And we miss what God wants to do. Well, here we are in Glen Ullin, North Dakota. And Nathan, our son, is now a senior in high school. I don't remember the dialogue specifically that we had, but there came this sense inside my wife and me, both of us, that, you know what, this is kind of been God's testing ground. This is his crucible for us. And you know what, God? We both prayed this prayer, I think, individually. If this is where you want us to be, this is where we'll stay until you give us different directions. And we'll stop chomping at the bit to get out of here. I realize this is being recorded and broadcast, so I hope nobody in Glen Ullin is going to watch this. Okay? And after we prayed that prayer, the initiation of a conversation to come to Williston opened up for us. And you know, There were probably many times in our ministry when if Williston would have called to be our pastor, yeah, we would have been scared out of our wits, but it'd be like, yeah, we're free. But when the invitation to come to Williston was, we just said, no, we don't want to come. We don't want to come. Not because we loved where we were, it's because we had shopping. That's why, anyway, but I'm just kidding. It's not until as we sensed that this is where God wanted us to be that we felt the peace about where we were in the present. Now, into this kind of a situation, I think the Apostle Paul writes, and this is where we're going to go today. If you brought a Bible or your device, whatever you brought with you today, I want you to find the New Testament book called Colossians. And we're going to kind of land on just a few short verses, and then we're going to ask some questions, and then we're going to pray. I want you to understand the context in which Paul writes this letter. Paul started all of these churches. This particular one is in Colossae, and he's writing a letter to the church, and they would get a copy of the letter, and the letter would really be read not only in that church in Colossae, but many different churches. And he writes into this amazing culture in the first century of Christianity. It's under Roman occupation, Roman influence, Roman authority. Half of the Roman Empire were slaves. Half of them were slaves. You were either a slave or a slave owner. That's kind of the way it was. And you know what? As a slave, you didn't really have the luxury of getting up on a Monday morning and shutting off the alarm clock and saying, I hate this job. That was your job. You had no rights. You had no authority. You had no privileges. You're a slave. I think this, I hate my job, I want a better job, is kind of an American thing that's come. But Paul writes this letter, and when he writes this letter, we're going to be in Colossians chapter 3. He writes to a lot of different issues. One of them, he says, husbands, this is how you need to treat your wives. Wives, this is how you respond to your husbands. Children, you need to obey your parents. And then he comes to this word that we kind of push back from in our culture today because of our history and our country. He addresses slaves. But when we read the word slaves today, we're going to understand it as if we were a slave in the first century hearing this being read. But we also want to read this like God is talking to us as employees or employers. And so we're in Colossians chapter 3, verse number 22, and this is how Paul writes toward everything we've talked about to this point. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. Don't you love it? In everything. And then he goes on to say, almost parenthetically, he says, and do it in everything, and do it not only when their eyes are on you to curry their favor, because you've all worked with somebody, or you can think of somebody right now that's like that. Like, they're the worst employee, but as soon as the boss walks in the door, man, you just think that they were the employee of the month, right? We have a name for people that are like that. We just won't say it in church, but we just know there are people like that. And they have evil motive and evil intent. And Paul says, look, slaves, you're not just a slave now, you're a follower of Christ. You have a different standard by which you work. And he says, I want you to obey your earthly masters in everything and do it not only in their eyes when you want to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Sincerity of heart really means the singleness of heart. We could look at this whole thing like we're an employee. We could say it like this: employees, obey your boss in everything. Just obey your boss in everything, because you know what? You're not working for your boss. I want you to think about who the real employer is in this situation. I want you to think about who opened the doors for you to get this job. It wasn't Job Service North Dakota. It wasn't the website. It wasn't the HR director. There's a bigger force at work in this world than the HR director. Okay? So you need to remember who you're working for, and not just when they're around, but all of the time. You know, some jobs, the boss isn't always there looking over your shoulder, is he? Doesn't see how you handle company resources or time or where you're at on the web or what you're doing at work. So Paul says, look, you need to remember that you have a different boss. You have a different boss. And then Paul, in the very next verse, he paints with a very broad brush in a word that he uses in verse number 23. Verse number 23 says this: whatever you do. Now, whatever is a lot, isn't it? Like, whatever is everything. He says, whatever you do, employee, whatever you do, follower of Christ, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. He says this, whatever you do. So you can't read this verse, roll your eyes and go, whatever. I mean, this is whatever you do. Whatever you do it as unto the Lord. Maybe you had a grandma. Maybe you went and complained to grandma or to your mom, or you went to complain to some saint in the church about what you were doing in life, and I had to teach this and do that and pick this up and work this. And they said, well, just do it as unto the Lord. Oh, you just hated hearing that. Because they were right. Only you wanted sympathy. Well, you're so right. You should just quit that job and tell the employer that he's a loser. I mean, but somebody said, just do it as unto the Lord. Well, that's kind of what Paul is saying here. Whatever. Or we could say it this way, wherever you are in life. If you're retired, if you're a student in the school, if you're a single parent, if you're a house mom, if you're an employer, wherever you are in life, whatever it is that God has placed you, so that you're not moving on ahead looking for the next opportunity, missing your current opportunity, wherever you are right now, just be single-hearted and passionate about this one thing that God has placed you in. I think that's what Paul is saying here. Now imagine this, you're a slave listening to this. And if you were a slave listening to this, you might be thinking, whatever. You know what? When you work for the Lord instead of for your earthly master, it changes the perspective on your job. Because you're not working for the boss, you're working for the master. And suddenly you can get up tomorrow morning, or if you go to work tonight or this afternoon, and you might be miserable in the job that you're in. You might be totally miserable in the job that you're in. But if you can get out of bed in the morning, you can shut off the alarm clock and you're getting the coffee ready, you can get ready for school in the morning, and you know what? God, this is where you have me in life right now. I made some choices, yes, but I made choices. You had doors of opportunity open for me, and I just walked through those, and this must be right now where you want me to be. God, today, I might be working for this company, that company, and you can name the names, but ultimately, God, you know who I'm working for? I'm here for you. I'm here for you. You're my boss. How can I please you? God, what is it today that you want to prepare me for? Lord, what do you want to develop in my character? Who do I need to be? What do you need to purge from inside of my heart? What it is you need to shave off that's rough on me right now? God, this is your time of preparation for me because I'm working for you. Now, you say, but Pastor, I'm not even a Christian. I don't even read the Bible. Look, I get that whole thing, but there's some great principles here. You could still live by these and have a whole different attitude on who you work for, because if it's something that's just now that you're doing until something better comes along, I'll almost guarantee you that you're going to be miserable. Opportunity leads to opportunity, but only when you see it as a time of preparation for something else that God is preparing you for. If it's just a step to something else, well, how long will you be there, and what can God do inside of you? Paul is ultimately saying, look, you're not working for your earthly master, you're working for the heavenly master. And it really changes the perspective on everything. And then the next verse I love so much, because remember, Paul is writing this and he's addressing specifically slaves. Imagine if you're a slave in the first century. You're a house slave, you're a house servant. You're taking care of the farming operation, you're taking care of the household demands, whatever it might be. And as a slave, you have no earthly rights. You own nothing. All you have is yes and no. That's all that you own. And when your master dies, you receive nothing. You're kicked out on the streets. And you look for another slave owner so that you have a roof over your head and food in your belly. And into that kind of a mindset, listen to what Paul says in verse number 24. You work as unto the Lord, since you know that you will receive an inheritance. An inheritance. What? Yeah, you're going to get an inheritance. Yeah, but I don't have any right. No, yeah, but you're going to get an inheritance not from your master, because look, everything he has, he got from God anyway. You're going to get an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ that you're serving. I'm thinking whatever, if you want to leave me in your will, any of you, if you're watching at home or watching online, you want to write me into your will, I'm all for it. But I got something better coming. You see, you couldn't leave me anything that compares to what God has in store for me. But I will miss that opportunity if all I can see right now is my present circumstances that are causing me difficulty and misery and unhappiness and all those kinds of things. And Paul says, look, we've got a better reward to come. It's a better reward to come. By that way, that was a very direct invitation to include us in your will there just a moment ago. I want to make that very clear. So, you won't know God's will for your life or your job or your career or a direction or a future if you miss where you are right now. And here's what I know about you and what I know about me. If we're not happy where we are in the moment, in the present, we're always looking ahead to the future, to something better. And I think sometimes we miss where we are in the moment. The incredible thing about this is you start to realize this the older you get. See, when you're in your teens, you don't think too far into the future. It's just natural. That's your DNA. That's just the way you're wired. When you're in your teens, you know what? You know what you're thinking about today on Sunday? You're thinking about Friday. Let's just get to Friday, right? You're just thinking about Friday. When you get in your 20s, you're thinking about well, getting married, and then when you're married, you think about when are we going to get a pet? Right? And then after you get the pet, then you think about when are we going to have children? You start thinking about the future a little ways in advance, like what's my next job? What's the next TV we're going to buy? What house or what apartment we're going to get into? And then the older you get, you start thinking a little bit different. You start looking back thinking, I wish I would have made some different decisions in my teens or 20s. I wish I would have maybe taken advantage of some opportunities that were there. Because, when you're 20, you worry about turning 30. When you're 30, you worry about turning 40. When you're 40, you know that 50's coming. When you're 50, you don't think about how old you are. You just think about how much time you have left, right? And you just have this sense inside of you that I only have so many years left, and what does God have in store for me? What am I supposed to do with my life? God, and I think it's a legitimate prayer for all of us to pray, God, show me your will for my life. Well, let me ask you some really hard questions here, just as we talk about finding the will of God, and maybe where you are right now. Maybe you're not very happy with where you are in life right now. Let me talk to employees a little bit here for just a moment. This can apply in a lot of different places, though, but let me ask you some very difficult questions, and then we're going to pray. The first question is this. Would you hire you based on your current work ethic? Let's say you're the HR director and you know who you are. I mean, you know your resume. Nobody knows your resume like you know your resume, and you're the HR director. You're the one in charge of hiring. Would you hire you based on your current work ethic? Or are you only in the company to get a paycheck? I don't care about the boss. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the other people. I'm just here for me. I'm just here to get what I can get so that I can pay the bills and move on with life. Can you start to move to be more single-hearted? Where you are right now, this is maybe not the ideal or dream job or career or direction for you in life, but can you, in this moment where God has placed you, because it's an open door, it was an opportunity, can you right now say, God, is this a time for preparing me for something better? Nobody can answer the question but you. The second question would be this. Are you preparing for an opportunity or just waiting for an opportunity? Are you preparing for an opportunity or just waiting for an opportunity? You see, where you are right now might not be the most ideal vocation or place in life, but there's a lot that you and I can do to prepare for what God has in store for us next. In retrospect, and this is the part where we would say, and I can say this now, at my age, the old saying is this: too soon old, too late smart. You know? And at this juncture in your life, you can see why God had you at certain places in life. You don't see it in the moment, but in retrospect, you start looking back and go, I see why God brought me up in this kind of a family. I see why I had this kind of a job. I see why He moved us to this place. I see why this happened in our life. I couldn't see it at the time because all I could think of was, what's next? And maybe you're in one of those very unhappy situations right now. And you say, all right, God, all right, Lord, I'm going to stop looking for the next opportunity. Lord, I'm going to focus on where I am right now. What are you trying to show me about me? The last question I would ask you is this: what can you do right now to prepare for the next opportunity? What can you do right now to prepare for the next opportunity? And fortunately for us, Paul, in the words that we read just a moment ago, already gave us the answer to that question. You know how we can prepare for the next opportunity? Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Not working for some human master, but instead you're working for the Lord. Whatever you do, you're changing diapers from sun up till long after sunset. You're having an effect on that child, mom, dad, that will have an impact 100 years from now. What an incredible task God has given you, mom and dad. Employee, look, we tend to think wherever we are in life, it's all about us, don't we? It's kind of the way it is. I remember hearing a story about a pastor who left a very uncomfortable pastorate. It was a difficult season in his life. Resigned the church, the house is packed. Climbs into the car, closes the door, children in the back seat, wife next to him. And he says, I wonder why God had us here anyway. Why did God bring me to this town to pastor this church? And from the back seat, his son said, Dad, what makes you think it's all about you all the time? But we tend to think that way, don't we? We only get focused on where we are and our miseries and discomfort. And we can have a whole different perspective if we can step back from that and say, God, this is your divine plan. This is your grand design in my life to place me where I am. Sometimes doors of opportunity open to you, and sometimes you go knocking on doors and they're closed. The incredible thing is, in the midst of this time that we were in this little church, we knocked on doors. We sent out resumes. And those doors never opened. And then there was other times churches would call us and ask us to come pastor the church. And in the moment, this fleshly part of me is thinking, I'm delivered, I'm free, you know? And what was so hard about this point in our life, what's so hard, I'm talking to my other pastor friends. I'm in this little German community pastoring this small church, and just down the road 30 miles, I have a close friend who's pastoring a church very similar to mine, and we could console one another on the phone. How's it going? Oh, let me tell you. Then he left that church and he went to a bigger church. And I call him, how's it going? Brother, I've been delivered. I'm in the promised land. I wanted to say, shut up. I'm not there. And then he left that church and went to a district position. He kept moving up and up, and I felt like God, you left us here. We were mad. Like, God, what do? You just left us here. You can be mad at God all you want. He doesn't care. He's got big shoulders, right? I'm telling you, you can miss it. You can miss it because that was God's preparation time for things ahead. Don't miss the golden opportunity that you're in right now because you're looking for the next opportunity. God is doing something in you and through you right where you are right now. Right now, you are in the center of God's will.